There's a special kind of cruelty that smiles while it cuts. At my little sister's wedding, my mother walked me past 300 guests, past the head family table where my name card was conspicuously missing, all the way to table 19, the vendor's table. Right beside the kitchen doors. You'll be more comfortable back here, sweetheart, she said, patting my arm for the watching crowd, away from all the important people. I was 33 years old and I sat down, because I always sat down. What my mother didn't know, what none of them ever bothered to ask, was that the quiet man I'd brought as my date, the one they'd looked straight through all evening, was the only reason the groom's entire family still had a company for my sister to marry into. And when the best man tapped his glass for the first toast, my date folded his napkin and he stood up. 300 people turned to look at him. So did my mother. Let me take you back before I tell you what he said. When that whole room went silent, if you've ever been the family member who gets seated, sorted, and quietly hidden, tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. I read every one. And stay to the end, because the best part isn't what he did. It's what I decided to do, the second I realized I finally had the power to choose. My name is Noelle Carter. I'm the older sister, and in my family, older sister came with a permanent rank. Second, my mother Diane ran our family like a seating chart. There were important people, and there was everyone else. And from the time I was a girl, taller, rounder, louder than the dainty daughter she'd hoped for, I knew which list I was on. My younger sister, Sloane, was the project. The pretty one. The one Mom drove to pageants and ballet. I was the one who got told to watch your portions, Noelle, at my own birthday dinner. I didn't shrink, though. That's the part they never forgave. I built a quiet, good life. I ran a small bookkeeping firm. 11 employees, my name on the door. I paid my own way. I'd been told I was too much so many times that I finally decided, somewhere around 30, that too much just meant more than you're comfortable with, and that was a them problem. Then Sloane got engaged to Preston Ashford. The Ashfords were old money, or the appearance of it. Ashford Development had built half the waterfront to my mother. Marrying Sloane into that family was the crowning achievement of her entire life. She started saying the Ashfords the way other people say the royal family. I was happy for Sloane. I was. I offered to help with everything. I got a polite, cool list of nothings to do, and 2 weeks before the wedding, when I asked Sloane where I'd be sitting and whether she wanted me to say a few words, she went quiet, then texted an hour later, "Mom's handling seating, and the toasts are kind of just for the wedding party. You understand." I understood. I always understood. I almost went alone, then Adrian offered to come. I'd been seeing Adrian Cole for about 8 months. We met the least glamorous way possible. He hired my firm to untangle the books on a charity he quietly funded. He was calm, unhurried. He wore soft gray suits and old watches, and he listened more than he spoke. On our third date, he told me plainly that I was the most capable person he'd ever met, and he said it like a simple fact, not a line. I knew Adrian had money. What I didn't fully advertise, because Adrian never advertised it himself, was how much or where it sat. Adrian's family office was the kind of quiet capital that doesn't have a logo, the kind that owns the buildings the loud people put their names on. He found the spotlight distasteful. The moment people know what you can do for them, he told me once, they stop telling you the truth, so he stayed quiet, and I loved that about him. When I brought Adrian to meet my family at the rehearsal dinner, my mother shook his hand for exactly 2 seconds, decided from his off-the-rack looking suit that he was no one important, and spent the rest of the night introducing Sloane's fiancé to everyone, while Adrian and I were seated, yes, near the door. Not one person in my family asked Adrian what he did. Not one. They'd already filed him where they'd filed me. The help, Adrian didn't mind. "It's fascinating," he murmured to me, sipping water. "They've told me everything about themselves and learned nothing about me. That's usually how people lose, Noelle." I didn't understand what he meant yet. I would. The wedding was at the Ashfords Club, all chandeliers and white roses and 300 of the city's self-important. I wore navy. I'd had the dress made, because nothing off a rack is cut for a woman shaped like me, and I'd decided long ago that if the world wouldn't make room for me, I'd have the room tailored. I felt good walking in, for about 4 minutes. Then my mother intercepted us at the edge of the ballroom, smile bright, eyes cold, and steered us, me by the elbow, Adrian trailing away from the candlelit family tables near the head of the room. "Noelle, honey, we had the most darling idea. We've put you back here." She stopped at table 19, tucked against the wall by the swinging kitchen doors. The place cards read like an apology, the wedding planner, the band's manager, the florist's assistant, the vendors, the staff. "It's just so much more relaxed back here. You won't have to make small talk with all the Ashford people, you understand?" I felt the old heat climb my neck. 300 people, and I could feel the nearest 50 pretending not to watch. "Mom," I said quietly. "I'm her sister, and you're seated," she said, still smiling, the way you'd talk to a child making a scene. "Don't make this difficult, Noelle. Today is about Sloane, not about you needing to be the center of everything." She glanced at Adrian, dismissing him in the same breath. "Your friend can sit with you, plenty of room," and she walked back toward the important people. I sat down at table 19. Of course I sat down. The florist's assistant gave me a small, kind, embarrassed smile, the kind one overlooked person gives another. Adrian didn't sit. He stood beside my chair for a moment, looking across that ballroom at the head table, at the Ashfords holding court, at my mother basking with an expression I'd never seen on his calm face. Not anger, something quieter and far more dangerous. "Calculation, Noelle," he said softly. "Do you know who's paying for all of this? The Ashfords. They're loaded." "No." He pulled out the chair next to me and finally sat, leaning close. "The Ashfords were loaded. Ashford Development has been underwater for 2 years. They overbuilt the waterfront and the financing came due last spring. 6 weeks ago, a private fund stepped in and bought their debt, all of it, to keep them from collapsing before this very public, very important wedding." He turned his water glass a slow quarter turn. "I sit on the investment committee of that fund, Noelle. We own the paper on this family, the flowers, the chandeliers, the club. Every bit of this is happening on our forbearance." A faint, dry smile. "And no one in this room has any idea because I never tell loud people what I can do for them." I stared at him. "I'd never use that to embarrass you," he said. "It's your family and your call always, but your mother just put you next to the kitchen in front of 300 people." He met my eyes. "So I'm going to ask you one question, and whatever you answer, I'll do exactly that and nothing more. Do you want to keep sitting down?" For 33 years I had kept sitting down. I thought about every folding chair, every watch your portions, every time I made myself smaller so the people who were supposed to love me could feel bigger. I thought about Sloane's text. "You understand," and the truth was, I did understand. I understood completely. They would never stop. There is no amount of grace, of competence, of quiet dignity that makes a family like mine decide to see you. They had to be made to. The best man rose and tapped his glass. The room hushed for the toasts, and I put my hand on Adrian's arm and I said, "No, I don't think I want to keep sitting down." Adrian set down his napkin, and he stood up. He didn't shout. Adrian has never shouted in his life. He simply stood, at table 19 by the kitchen doors, and the strange gravity of a calm man rising at the wrong table pulled every eye in that ballroom toward him. The best man faltered. Conversation died. "Forgive me," Adrian said, his quiet voice carrying in the sudden silence. "I'll only take a moment and then I'll give the floor back. My name is Adrian Cole. I'm here with Noelle, the bride's sister. You may not have met her tonight. She's been seated back here by the kitchen." Heads turned to find me. My mother's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. "I wanted to introduce myself properly," Adrian went on, "because I find myself in an unusual position at this wedding. You see, my partners and I have the privilege of being the principal investors behind Ashford Development." A ripple went through the room. Preston's father at the head table sat up very straight, the blood draining from his face as he placed the name. "We believe in this family's future. We've been glad to support it through a difficult stretch," quietly. "The way real support is given." He let that sit. Then his eyes moved deliberately to my mother. "Which is why I was so surprised tonight," he said gently, lethally, "to watch the woman I love be walked to the back of the room and told she wasn't one of the important people, because from where I sit, and I do sit on the side of the table that matters to this family's balance sheet, Noelle Carter is the single most important person I've met in this entire city." He raised his water glass toward me. "To Noelle, the most capable woman in any room she's ever been told to leave." Nobody breathed, and then the florist's assistant beside me, bless her, stood up and raised her glass. Then a server, then, slowly, half the room, because nothing makes people choose a side faster than discovering who holds the money. My mother stood frozen, glass untouched, finally, fully seeing me, and seeing exactly what she'd done, in front of everyone who mattered to her. Here's the part I'm proudest of. I didn't gloat, I didn't burn it down, because somewhere between table 19 and that toast I'd realized something. The power I'd just been handed was only worth having if I used it like the person they always swore I wasn't. Preston's father came to me first, practically tripping over himself, all warmth now. Noel, there's been a terrible mistake. Please, come sit at the head table. I thanked him kindly, and I said I was comfortable where I was. Let them sit with that. Let the whole room see the bride's sister choose the kitchen table on her own terms, with the city's quiet money beside her, perfectly at ease. My mother came next. The sweetness was back, trembling now. Noel, sweetheart, I had no idea Adrian was. You should have told me who he. That's the whole problem, Mom, I said, calm, not cruel. You decided who he was without asking. You decided who I was a long time ago, too. The only difference tonight is that this time it cost you something in front of the people whose opinion you actually care about. I stood, and for once I didn't feel too tall or too much. I felt exactly the right size. I'm not going to make a scene. I love Sloane and this is her day. But I'm done being seated, Mom. By you, by anyone. I'll come to family things when I'm wanted at the table. The real one. Until then you have my number. You've always had my number. You just never thought it was worth dialing. Sloane found me by the doors 20 minutes later. Mascara smudged, whispering that she was sorry. That she hadn't known Mom would go that far. I hugged her, because she's my sister and I meant it. But I also said gently, you knew about the toast list. You knew there'd be no seat for me up front. You understand, remember? She started to cry. I forgive you, I told her. But forgiving you and pretending it didn't happen aren't the same thing. I'm choosing to stop pretending. Then Adrian and I left early, before the cake, and we got cheeseburgers in a diner in our wedding clothes, and I laughed until I cried for an entirely different reason. That was a year ago. My mother and I talk now, carefully, on new terms. The first holiday after the wedding, I noticed something. My place card was at the center of the table. She'll deny to her grave that it means anything. It means everything. Adrian and I are still together. He still wears off the rack-looking suits and lets people underestimate him, and I've learned to love being underestimated right alongside him, because there is no sweeter moment than watching someone realize too late exactly who they put by the kitchen doors. But that's not really the lesson, and I want to be honest with you about what is. For 33 years I believed that if I were just good enough, capable enough, gracious enough, small enough, my family would finally move me up to the important table. The truth is, that table was never going to have a seat for me, because the whole point of it was having someone to seat below. Some people don't have an important table. They just have a hierarchy and they need a bottom rung, and they had quietly elected me to it before I could even speak. Adrian didn't save me that night. The money didn't save me. What saved me was the single sentence I finally said to myself at table 19, I don't want to keep sitting down. Everything after that was just logistics. If you've spent your life being sorted and seated and hidden by people who were supposed to love you, hear me. You don't have to wait for them to move you up. You're allowed to stand up. The room will turn. Let it. So tell me, if you were Noel, would you have taken Preston's father up on the head table and let the whole room watch you rise? Or would you have done what she did and chosen the kitchen table on your own terms? Comment head table or my terms below. I genuinely want to know how you'd have played it. And if this one reminded you that too much usually just means more than they could handle, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and come back for the next one. The story of a woman whose own mother mailed her a bill for the cost of raising a disappointment. So she married the man the family called beneath them and made that invoice the most expensive mistake her mother ever made. I'll see you there.